Hey guys, it's Paul from Online Sax Academy. In today's lesson, I'm going to be showing you two really effective methods you can use to create really melodic solos. And I've got two example solos for you to try over the amazing Roy Hargrove tune, Strasbourg St Denis. It's a really nice one to play because it's got kind of a laid-back funk groove, but it's got some really interesting chords in it as well. Now, if you're newer to improvising and you get confronted with all these chord symbols, it can look a bit intimidating. But the good news is you can take a number of different approaches when you're improvising over this song. And the first one is taking inspiration from the actual melody itself. The melody is mainly built up from the minor pentatonic scale, and this minor pentatonic scale will work over all of these chords. And this is great because it frees up your mental space to focus more on playing with good phrasing and good time and rhythm. It also just sounds really good as well, floating over the top of these chords with this minor pentatonic scale. So first of all, you should learn to play this scale from memory so it comes out really effortlessly and you don't have to think about it. Once you've got that down though, that's only the beginning. Now we're going to start looking at ways you can use that scale to actually make it sound good. The first thing we're going to do is divide up this chord sequence not into one long 8-measure phrase, but into 4 2-measure phrases. And this gives us a really nice framework to work with. 2 measures is a really natural way to feel a phrase, and so it's a great one to start with. For example, here's a 2-measure phrase. Now, along with putting things into 2-measure phrases, I'm also putting an idea into this phrase. So for example, for this phrase, I was thinking something that goes up. Now, of course, there's any number of ways you could play a phrase that goes up using this scale. For example, here's another one that's a bit more advanced. And this is how you can start to structure your practice when you're improvising. A lot of people can get a bit lost when they're practicing improvising because there's no strict sheet music to follow. But if you give yourself 2-measure phrases and ideas behind those 2-measure phrases, you can practice improvising lots of different ways to express that same idea. So here's another example. This is the second phrase in the beginner solo that's coming up. In this phrase, I wanted to restrict myself to just using 3 notes from the scale. And this can be a nice thing to do after you've played a phrase that has lots of different notes in it, because it adds some balance to what we've just had. Now, other ideas you can play with are things like putting in bigger jumps in your solos. On the whole, it generally sounds more melodic if you move around in a stepwise motion, but that doesn't mean you have to only restrict yourself to that. And occasionally it's nice to put in some big jumps, either jumping up or jumping down. And for the fourth phrase, I basically wanted to land on the note E for alto sax, which is A for tenor sax. This note is the major 7th of the chord. Now, this is slightly more advanced and we're moving away from just using the minor pentatonic scale. And you by no means have to do this, but it can be an interesting sound to play with. And it brings more of a kind of floaty sound to the solo. Now for the next idea, I was using a slightly more advanced technique, which is leading into the 2-measure phrase. So what's happening here is I'm leading in 3/8 notes before, and this can help bring a lot of forward momentum to your phrases. Another idea you can use is just a long note. We can often get trapped into just using constant 8th notes or constant 16th notes, and it's nice for the listener and for you just to hold a long note. It can help to either build tension or release tension, depending on how you use it. Generally speaking, if it's more towards the beginning of the phrase, it tends to build tension as it wants to move somewhere, and if it's at the end of a phrase, it's kind of a moment of relaxation. Here's an example with me doing a long note at the beginning of a phrase. Coming up now is the example solo that uses all of these phrases. Now, you can learn to play this solo and it will certainly help with you becoming more comfortable with the scale. And then you can start to take the ideas from that solo and put them into your own phrases. Now, I'd recommend getting the free PDF for this solo, and that's available at onlinesaxacademy.com, and the link is down below. And that way you'll be able to print it out and mark up the page and take any ideas you like from it. Now, if you're learning how to improvise, then you can apply some of your knowledge of chords and chord tones and start to incorporate that as well. And this will give you a kind of more detailed sound to your solo, which can be a really nice contrast to the more kind of horizontal approach of playing with just one scale. For example, here's an example phrase which is using things like chromatic approach notes and chord tones to outline some of the chords. Now this is a more advanced approach, and if you'd like to learn how to play things like this, then over at Online Sax Academy I have the Learn to Improvise course. And this course steps you right the way through from the beginning, all the way up to being able to improvise over chord changes like this. And that whole course and all the other material on the site is available for premium members. Just click on the Go Premium button on the site to get signed up. Okay, so here's the example intermediate version, and premium members can get the PDF download of this. You can also get an extended backing track as well, which you can use to practice with, along with the performance tracks of these solos. Now you can apply the same technique of looking at things in two measure phrases and see if you can work out what idea I'm using behind each phrase. There isn't really a wrong answer to this, it's just whatever you feel the idea is behind that phrase. And then you would take that idea and apply it to your own phrases. But remember, it's not about these specific notes, it's the more general idea behind the notes. Now you want to take it slowly with each of these ideas. You can work with just one or two ideas for a whole week until they become really ingrained and you feel really comfortable with them. Another nice technique you can try before putting together a full solo is play a two measure phrase and then just rest for 2 measures. And that just gives you a chance to recover and come back in with your next idea. So don't forget to get the free PDF of that beginner example solo, and premium members can of course download the intermediate solo and the backing tracks, along with having access to all the courses on the site. If you're new to the channel, hit subscribe so you don't miss out on future lessons, and I'll see you guys next week.